Have you ever stood before an ancient painting, lost in its beauty, completely unaware that you might be staring at a secret, not just any secret, but an entire architectural blueprint, meticulously hidden within the brushstrokes by artists centuries ago? Picture this, a breathtaking cathedral fresco, admired by generations, its vibrant colors and intricate scenes captivating every visitor. But beneath the surface lies something even more extraordinary, a carefully encoded design, a master builder's plan, disguised as art to protect it from destruction or theft. This isn't the plot of a mystery novel. It's a real, centuries-old practice that allowed architects and artists to preserve their knowledge against all odds. Think about the sheer ingenuity it took to embed these blueprints into paintings, right under the noses of those who might have sought to erase them. In times of war, political upheaval, or even religious persecution, these hidden designs became a lifeline, a way to ensure that the secrets of construction, the genius of engineering, could survive. From the soaring arches of Renaissance cathedrals to the forgotten walls of medieval monasteries, these disguised blueprints tell stories of resilience, collaboration, and sheer creative brilliance. They're not just art, they're time capsules waiting for the right eyes to decode their messages. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Together, we'll peel back the layers of history to uncover how these blueprints were hidden, why they mattered, and the astonishing techniques artists used to conceal them in plain sight. You'll discover how a single stroke of paint could mark the curve of a vaulted ceiling, or how the folds of a saint's robe might secretly outline the foundation of a fortress. By the time we're done, you'll never look at art the same way again, because once you know where to look, the hidden world of architectural secrets reveals itself in the most unexpected places. So, are you ready to step into the shadows of history and uncover the blueprints disguised as art? Let's begin. The story of hidden blueprints begins not with grand cathedrals or Renaissance masterpieces, but in the hushed workshops of ancient builders who understood the fragility of knowledge. Long before paper, scrolls, or parchment, architects faced a dilemma: how to preserve the secrets of their craft when entire libraries could vanish in an instant. The answer lay in plain sight, woven into the very art that adorned palace walls and temple floors. Take the Byzantine Empire, where artisans perfected the art of disguise. A mosaic depicting a saint's halo might double as a geometric guide for domed ceilings, its golden tesserae secretly mapping the precise angles needed to distribute weight. These weren't mere decorations, they were survival manuals for civilizations under siege. During the Middle Ages, the stakes grew even higher. Guilds of masons and builders operated like underground networks, passing down techniques through cryptic symbols hidden in stained glass or frescoes. Imagine a medieval painter carefully weaving the layout of a fortress into the folds of a biblical scene, knowing that if invaders ransacked the town, the art on the church walls would remain untouched, safeguarding the blueprint for rebuilding. This wasn't just about preserving technology, it was an act of quiet defiance. When rulers burned books or banned certain architectural styles, these hidden designs became a way to outwit censorship, ensuring that knowledge would endure long after the tyrants were gone. What's truly remarkable is how these artists and builders collaborated across generations. A technique encoded in a 6th century mosaic might resurface centuries later in a Gothic cathedral, its meaning deciphered by a guild master who recognized the ancient pattern. The hidden lines in a painting weren't just practical, they were a language, a way to whisper across time. And while we might marvel at the artistry of these works today, their greatest masterpiece was the illusion itself, convincing the world that they were merely beautiful, while secretly holding the keys to lost worlds. The Renaissance wasn't just a rebirth of art, it was a revolution in secrecy. As Europe emerged from the Middle Ages, artists and architects began playing a daring game of hide and seek with knowledge, embedding complex designs into their work so flawlessly that even the most discerning eyes might miss them. Take Leonardo da Vinci, whose paintings were far more than masterpieces, they were puzzles. Beneath the serene smile of the Mona Lisa or the dramatic tension of the Last Supper, geometric grids and precise ratios whispered the secrets of proportion and perspective. These weren't just artistic choices, they were lessons in architecture disguised as beauty. Da Vinci's obsession with merging art and science reached its peak in his Vitruvian Man, where the human form became a living blueprint, its outstretched limbs tracing the perfect symmetry of sacred buildings. But he wasn't alone. Michelangelo, while painting the Sistine Chapel ceiling, hid structural insights within the swirl of clouds and the curves of limbs. The way a forearm bent or a drape folded often mirrored the stress lines of arches or the load-bearing principles of domes. Even more audacious were the stained glass artisans of Chartres and Notre Dame, who encoded entire cathedral floor plans into the kaleidoscopic patterns of their windows. To the faithful, these were radiant biblical scenes. To initiates, they were instruction manuals. The rose windows petals might outline the ribs of a vault, while the tracery between saints secretly mapped the scaffolding needed to build it. This wasn't just about preserving knowledge, it was about power. In an era when guilds guarded their techniques like state secrets, hiding blueprints in art became the ultimate insurance policy. If a rival city burned your books, your designs lived on in the chapel's glass. If a patron demanded changes, the original vision could still be recovered by those who knew where to look. And perhaps most brilliantly, these hidden layers turned every great artwork into a collaborative project across time. A fresco painted in Florence in the 15th century might hold the key to repairing a crumbling wall in Vienna 200 years later, if someone could decipher the code. The genius of these Renaissance masters wasn't just their ability to create, it was their willingness to hide. They understood that the truest form of preservation isn't locking knowledge away, but weaving it into something so cherished, so seemingly ordinary, that it becomes invisible. Their paintings and windows were more than art, they were time machines carrying the future's tools into the past's hands. And as we stand before these works today, we're not just observers, we're detectives piecing together the whispers they left behind. Hidden within these disguised blueprints wasn't just structural knowledge, there was poetry. The same brushstroke that marked the load-bearing wall of a cathedral might also trace the golden ratio, a sacred mathematical harmony believed to connect earthly creations to the divine. Artists didn't merely hide blueprints, they infused them with layers of meaning, turning functional lines into philosophical statements. Take the rose windows of Gothic cathedrals. Their radiating patterns weren't just guides for masons assembling stone petals overhead. They mirrored the cosmos itself, with each colored pane aligning to celestial events. A shadow cast at noon on a saint's feast day might point to a hidden vault, while the interplay of light and geometry whispered esoteric truths to those who could read them. Color, too, became a secret language. In the frescoes of Italian monasteries, the gradual shift from deep crimson to pale gold in a sunset wasn't just aesthetic. It could indicate the varying thickness of a dome's shell, with warmer hues marking where reinforcement was needed. Even the folds of a painted robe might conceal a compass rose, its cardinal points aligning with the building's true orientation, disguised as drapery. This wasn't random symbolism, it was a deliberate fusion of science and spirituality. the artists understood that the most powerful secrets aren't locked away but woven into the fabric of beauty itself, where only the worthy would think to look. And then there were the riddles. Some blueprints weren't just hidden, they were encrypted. A series of seemingly decorative dots along a mural's border might correspond to musical notes, their intervals revealing the ideal acoustics for a choir loft. Or consider the labyrinthine floor mosaics of medieval churches. Walk their paths in the right sequence, and the turns mapped the ventilation shafts hidden within the walls. Decoding these required more than technical skill. It demanded a Renaissance mind, fluent in art, mathematics, and even astrology. That's why these works endured. They weren't just preserving architecture, they were testing the ingenuity of future generations, inviting them to see beyond the surface and reclaim the lost wisdom of the past. What's astonishing is how these symbols transcended borders. A technique buried in a Persian miniature, say, the precise curve of a garden arch doubling as a structural diagram, might reappear centuries later in a Spanish chapel, adapted by builders who decoded its meaning. This was a global conversation conducted in the silent language of lines and pigments, and while wars erased libraries and empires fell, these disguised designs survived, carried not on fragile parchment but in the enduring medium of art. They remind us that the greatest secrets aren't stolen or lost, they're hidden in plain sight, waiting for the curious to uncover them. Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling dazzles millions with its vibrant scenes of creation and prophecy, but tilt your gaze just slightly, and another story emerges, one written in geometry and hidden proportions. Those sweeping biblical panels aren't randomly arranged. They follow the exact dimensions of Solomon's temple, an architectural marvel believed lost when the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem. How did Michelangelo know? The artist spent years poring over ancient texts smuggled out of Constantinople, piecing together the temple's sacred measurements. When he mapped them onto the chapel's curved ceiling, he wasn't just decorating a papal chapel, he was reconstructing history in pigment. Look closer at the way the figures bend and twist across the vault. The tension in Adam's outstretched arm mirrors the weight distribution of a barrel vault, while the swirling background drapery traces the load-bearing lines of a dome. Even the color transitions from the deep blues of the creation to the fiery oranges of the Last Judgment subtly indicate material thickness, with warmer hues marking where additional structural support would be needed in stone. This wasn't artistic coincidence, it was a masterclass in architectural engineering, disguised as divine inspiration. What makes the Sistine Chapel's hidden layers truly extraordinary is their dual purpose. The frescoes served the Vatican's immediate needs as breathtaking religious art, but they also became a time capsule for builders facing an uncertain future. During the turbulent years of the Reformation, when architectural knowledge risked being lost or suppressed, Michelangelo's ceiling preserved critical techniques where no inquisitor would think to burn them on the Pope's own walls. The same curvature that gives depth to God separating light from darkness also demonstrates how to counteract the lateral thrust in a cathedral's roofing system. Modern laser scans reveal even deeper secrets. The plaster layers contain subtle indentations, not random texture, but intentional markings indicating where ribs should intersect in a Gothic vault. Some scholars believe Michelangelo left these as tactile guides, knowing future restorers might need to rebuild from scratch. It's as if he anticipated that one day, long after his death, someone would run their fingers across that ceiling and feel the bones of architecture beneath the paint. That's the genius of these disguised blueprints. They speak not just to the eyes, but to the hands of those who know how to listen. This hidden dimension transforms how we see the Renaissance. These artists weren't just making pretty pictures, they were engaging in an act of radical preservation. By embedding construction secrets in works too precious to destroy, they ensured that even if every textbook vanished, the knowledge would live on, hidden in the very last place anyone would think to look. The Sistine Chapel's ceiling isn't just a marvel of art history. It's a rescue mission painted across the sky. Medieval monasteries weren't just spiritual sanctuaries. They were vaults of architectural ingenuity, where every brushstroke on a chapel wall or margin of an illuminated manuscript could hold the key to rebuilding a civilization. Picture a Benedictine monk in the 10th century, carefully painting a scene of Noah's Ark onto a refectory wall. To the untrained eye, it's a simple biblical illustration. But look closer. The ark's dimensions match the exact proportions of the monastery's grain storehouse, its staggered decks mirroring the ventilation system that kept supplies dry. This wasn't accidental. Monastic artists mastered the art of embedding practical knowledge within sacred imagery, creating a visual library that could outlast wars, fires, or the deliberate destruction of written records. The secret to their success lay in the ancient art of memory, a technique where complex information was tied to vivid mental images. A monk studying a fresco of the Last Supper wouldn't just see apostles, he'd notice how the table's length corresponded to the infirmary's floor plan, or how the folds in Christ's robe echoed the angle of a roof truss. These visual cues transformed art into a mnemonic device, allowing builders to reconstruct entire structures from memory if written plans were lost. During the Viking raids, when monasteries like Lindisfarne went up in flames, it was these disguised designs painted on surviving walls or sewn into tapestries that enabled communities to rise from the ashes. Some of the most ingenious examples hide in plain sight. The labyrinthine floor tiles of Chartres Cathedral, often dismissed as decorative, actually encode the monastery's sewage system, the twists and turns mapping underground channels that kept the complex hygienic. Even the vibrant herb gardens depicted in manuscripts served dual purposes. Their layouts mirrored the cloister's architectural footprint, while the plants themselves were painted in sequences that indicated which walls needed specific mortar mixtures to resist dampness. This wasn't just preservation, it was a form of silent resistance. When Charlemagne's reforms standardized church architecture across Europe, dissenting communities smuggled their regional techniques into frescoes, ensuring local building traditions survived imperial decrees. What's remarkable is how these monastic blueprints transcended language. A Cistercian monk from France could read the structural secrets in a Spanish manuscript's border illustrations because the visual language was universal. Dots along a painted vine might represent load-bearing columns, while the golden ratio hidden in a saint's halo could dictate the curvature of an apse. This system thrived because it appealed to the medieval mind's love of layered meaning, where every image was a doorway to deeper knowledge. The brilliance of these monastic artists wasn't just their ability to conceal. It was their foresight to make the act of looking an act of devotion. By tying architectural secrets to sacred stories, they ensured that future generations would study these works with reverence, and in doing so, unknowingly safeguard the very techniques that kept their world standing. The next time you see a medieval fresco, remember, those fading pigments might not just depict heaven, they could be holding up the roof. The Freemasons didn't just build structures, they built legends. Walk into any Masonic lodge and you'll find walls adorned with symbols, the all-seeing eye, the compass and square, intricate checkerboard floors. But what if these weren't just decorative? Hidden within the art of Masonic meeting halls and public paintings lies a tantalizing possibility that these symbols served as coded blueprints, preserving the Guild's most guarded architectural secrets. Take the famous Masonic tracing boards, elaborate paintings used to teach initiates. To outsiders, they appear as allegorical scenes, a winding staircase, a celestial vault, a broken column. But to a trained eye, those elements might reveal something far more practical: the exact proportions of a perfect arch, the stress points of a flying buttress, or even the acoustic calculations for an opera house. The connection makes sense when you consider history. Freemasons emerged from the stonemason guilds of the Middle Ages, where knowledge was power, and power needed protection. During periods of persecution, when guilds were disbanded or their manuscripts burned, art became the perfect cipher. A Renaissance painting of the Tower of Babel, for instance, might seem like a moral lesson on hubris. But look closer: the spiral ramp winding around the tower, that's a near-perfect match for the helical staircases in Masonic lodges, designed to distribute weight without central supports. The crumbling bricks at the base, they could illustrate the fatal flaws in certain foundation techniques. Even the workers' tools scattered in the foreground might double as a materials list, each chisel and mallet representing a specific type of stone-cutting technique. Some of the most compelling evidence comes from unexpected places. In 18th century London, a series of tavern murals depicting biblical scenes were discovered to contain precise geometric overlays matching the floor plans of nearby Masonic temples. The curve of Delilah's scissors in one panel aligned perfectly with the architrave of a secret meeting room's doorway, while Samson's falling pillars mirrored the load-bearing columns in the building's basement. Coincidence? Unlikely. These artists were often guild members themselves, weaving practical knowledge into narratives that would never arouse suspicion. But the intrigue doesn't stop there. Certain Masonic symbols transcend individual artworks, appearing across continents and centuries like a shared architectural language. The checkerboard floors common in Dutch Golden Age paintings. They're identical to the pavement in Masonic lodges, symbolizing duality, but they also function as proportional grids. A builder could use the alternating squares to calculate the ideal width-to-height ratio for a stable wall, simply by counting the tiles. Even the ubiquitous G at the center of Masonic art, said to represent geometry or the grand architect, might have served as a literal guidepost. In some lodge paintings, lines drawn from the G to specific symbols reveal the sightlines needed for perfect acoustics in a lecture hall. Of course, not every theory holds water. Scholars debate whether these patterns were intentional blueprints or simply artistic conventions of the time. Yet the persistence of these designs across unrelated artworks in different eras suggests something more deliberate. The Freemasons understood that the best way to hide a secret isn't to bury it, but to display it proudly, wrapped in symbolism so rich that most would never think to look deeper. Their art wasn't just decoration, it was a living archive, ensuring that even if their lodges were raided or their books burned, the knowledge would endure. So the next time you see a painting from the Renaissance or Enlightenment era, pause for a moment. That angel's outstretched arm might be more than a dramatic gesture. It could be pointing the way to a hidden vault. The swirling clouds in the background, they might trace the ideal curve of a dome. The Freemasons remind us that great art is never just what meets the eye. Sometimes the brushstrokes themselves are the blueprint. Baroque artists didn't just paint ceilings, they engineered them. Andrea Pozzo's masterpiece in Rome's Sant'Ignazio Church stretches overhead like a celestial vault, its painted columns seeming to soar into infinity. But tilt your head and the illusion cracks literally. Those marble pillars aren't stone at all, they're pigment on plaster, bending perspective so perfectly that they reveal the mathematical principles needed to construct real domes. This was no mere trick of the eye. Pozzo's frescoes functioned as immersive textbooks, where every brushstroke taught a lesson in applied geometry. The way a painted angel's hand grazed a faux cornice demonstrated the precise angle for distributing weight in a curved structure. Even the shadows weren't decorative, they showed apprentices how light would interact with three-dimensional arches long before the first stone was laid. Churches across Europe became classrooms without walls. In Vienna's Jesuit church, Pozzo's pupil Melchior Stadel painted a ceiling that appeared to open to the heavens, a dizzying spiral of figures ascending toward a glowing cross. But the real magic lay in the grid beneath the spectacle. The converging lines of the composition aligned exactly with the church's hidden reinforcement beams, turning the fresco into a living blueprint. Visiting architects could study the painting to understand how to counteract the lateral thrust in their own dome projects. The artistry wasn't just impressive, it was instructional, embedding engineering solutions in scenes of divine glory. What made the Baroque approach revolutionary was its audacity. Unlike the subtle symbols of medieval monks or the geometric ciphers of Renaissance masters, these artists hid their blueprints in the most visible place imaginable, right above the congregation's heads. A priest delivering a sermon might unknowingly stand beneath a painted vault that secretly mapped the load-bearing points of the very building he occupied. The technique was so effective that restorers centuries later used these frescoes to reconstruct damaged ceilings, following the original artist's embedded guidelines like a repair manual written in color and light. The brilliance of Pozzo's illusions went beyond technical skill. By merging art and architecture so seamlessly, he ensured that the knowledge would never be lost. Books could burn, guilds could dissolve, but a fresco covering thousands of square feet, that was permanent. And because these works were commissioned by the church, an institution that valued continuity above all, they were maintained with reverence across generations. The paint flaking from a cherub's wing might reveal not just plaster, but a cross-section diagram of how to reinforce a cracking dome. Perhaps most remarkably, these Baroque masters anticipated modern augmented reality. Their ceilings weren't static images, they were interactive guides. Walk toward the altar, and the perspective shifted to show how columns should taper. Stand beneath the transept, and the foreshortened figures demonstrated optimal sightlines for balcony construction. In an age before blueprints were standardized, these immersive paintings allowed architects to visualize complex spatial relationships in real time. The next time you crane your neck in a Baroque church, remember, you're not just looking at art, you're standing inside the architect's mind. While European masters were disguising cathedrals in frescoes across the world in Japan, artists were embedding an entirely different kind of secret into their cherry blossom landscapes. After the Tokugawa shogunate banned new castle construction in the 17th century to prevent rival lords from growing too powerful, a remarkable workaround emerged. Woodblock print artists began slipping castle designs into seemingly innocent scenes. A mountain's jagged silhouette might secretly trace the outline of a defensive wall, while clusters of pine needles subtly marked the ideal placement of watchtowers. The most famous example, Hokusai's 36 views of Mount Fuji. Look beyond the iconic wave, and you'll notice how the foothills mirror the tiered structure of Edo Castle's stone foundations, their gentle slopes hiding precise angles for deflecting cannon fire. China's scholars took a more philosophical approach. When imperial edicts standardized building practices during the Ming Dynasty, dissenting architects turned to landscape painting as their silent rebellion. A misty scroll depicting the Huangshan Mountains wasn't just art. Its faint grid lines, visible only when held at specific angles, preserved forbidden feng shui principles. The waterfall's trajectories indicated optimal water channel placements, while the spacing between peaks secretly dictated the harmonic proportions for courtyard homes. These weren't mere suggestions, they were survival tactics. during the Qing dynasty's literary purges, when architectural manuals were burned for containing subversive geometry, these painted mountains became the last repositories of ancient wisdom. Zen gardens elevated concealment to spiritual practice. The raked gravel waves of Kyoto's Ryoanji temple appear abstract, but temple records reveal they were originally designed as training tools. Each curve in the sand corresponded to the roof pitch of nearby buildings, teaching novices structural principles through meditation. Step back, and the garden's empty spaces align perfectly with the temple's hidden support beams, a living diagram of negative space as architectural reinforcement. Even the placement of rocks followed secret codes. Their groupings matched the column arrangements needed to withstand earthquakes, transforming spiritual contemplation into seismic engineering lessons. The universality of these practices speaks volumes. From Japanese castles to Chinese scrolls, the impulse to hide blueprints in beauty wasn't just practical, it was deeply human. These artists understood that what's cherished endures. A warlord might demolish a fortress, but who would destroy a beloved landscape painting? An emperor could ban building treatises, but who would suspect a monk's meditation garden? Across continents and centuries, this shared wisdom whispers the same truth. When knowledge is woven into art, it becomes immortal. The next time you admire an ancient artwork, remember, you might not just be seeing beauty. You might be holding a map to lost worlds. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how we built, it changed how we remembered. For centuries, art had been the silent guardian of architectural knowledge, its pigments and brushstrokes safeguarding the secrets of vaults and buttresses. But with the clatter of steam-powered presses and the rise of mass-produced blueprints, that ancient partnership between artist and architect began to unravel. Suddenly, precise technical drawings could be replicated by the thousand, distributed across continents in weeks rather than generations. The need to hide designs in paintings faded, and with it, a tradition that had endured since the first Mason carved symbols into temple walls. Yet this shift wasn't as clean as history books suggest. Even as factories churned out standardized plans, a few visionary architects resisted. Antoni Gaudí, the eccentric genius behind Barcelona's Sagrada Familia, famously distrusted conventional blueprints. Instead, he worked with watercolors so abstract they baffled his contemporaries' swirling washes of color that seemed more like dreamscapes than construction documents. But look closer, those ethereal gradients actually mapped the cathedral's load-bearing curves, with deeper blues indicating areas requiring reinforced concrete. Gaudí wasn't just being artistic, he was encoding structural calculations in a medium no machine could replicate. His workshop became a last bastion of the old ways, where apprentices learned to read architecture through pigment density and brushstroke direction. The separation of art and architecture wasn't just practical, it was philosophical. Where medieval builders saw divine geometry in every fresco, Victorian engineers prized efficiency over symbolism. A Gothic mason might spend years perfecting a rose window whose tracery secretly stabilized the wall beneath it, but to an industrial age architect, such dual purposes seemed wasteful. The new motto was specialization. Let art be beauty, let buildings be function. And yet, traces of the old symbiosis lingered. Look at the wrought iron vines curling up the balconies of Parisian arcades, seemingly decorative, until you realize their tendrils follow the exact stress lines of the underlying framework. Or examine the mosaics in London's industrial age train stations, where the tessellation patterns secretly guided bricklayers in laying curved vaults. What's fascinating is how these remnants evolved. As blueprints became ubiquitous, the hidden designs in art grew more playful, less vital. Art Nouveau architects like Hector Guimard hid subway entrance plans in the flowing lines of his iconic Parisian metro gates, not out of necessity, but as a nod to tradition. Meanwhile, in America, Louis Sullivan's intricate skyscraper ornamentation often concealed structural adjustments, a final flourish of the old craft before steel and glass modernism swept it aside. These weren't survival tactics anymore, they were inside jokes, a way for architects to wink at history while marching toward the future. The real tragedy wasn't that the practice died, it's that we forgot how to see it. Today, we admire Gaudí's watercolors as quirky artifacts, oblivious to the calculus hidden in their hues. We photograph Art Nouveau ironwork without realizing its curves once doubled as load diagrams. The Industrial Revolution gave us precision, but it cost us a language, one where every stroke of paint could be a pillar, every mosaic tile a map. Perhaps that's why these last examples feel so magical. They're not just designs, they're farewell letters from an era when art and architecture shared a secret, written in a code we've almost lost the ability to read. The paint on ancient masterpieces is no longer the final frontier. With the hum of X-ray fluorescent scanners and the precision of 3D laser mapping, art historians and engineers are uncovering layers of history invisible to the naked eye. Take that unassuming Spanish chapel fresco, admired for centuries as a simple depiction of the Virgin Mary. When researchers passed their scanners over its surface, the machine's readout revealed something astonishing. Beneath the serene image lay the precise floor plan of a Gothic cathedral, its nave and transept sketched in ghostly lead white outlines. The implications are staggering. This wasn't just a discarded draft. The architectural lines aligned perfectly with the chapel's own structure, suggesting the painting served as both devotional art and a covert construction guide. These high-tech revelations are rewriting art history. In Italy, multispectral imaging exposed a hidden grid system beneath Botticelli's Primavera, its geometric lines matching the proportions of Florence's Ospedale degli Innocenti. Was the artist merely practicing perspective, or was he embedding Brunelleschi's architectural breakthroughs into mythological scenes? The debate rages, but one thing is clear: technology has given us a new lens to see the past. Even brushstrokes once considered purely expressive now reveal hidden functions. The swirling clouds in a Baroque ceiling fresco, when analyzed with reflectance transformation imaging, show tool marks indicating where the artist pressed templates into wet plaster templates that doubled as architectural stencils for vault ribbing. Not all discoveries are so straightforward. Some layers might indeed be abandoned drafts, like the spectral outlines of a different castle lay out beneath a Japanese screen painting. But others show unmistakable intentionality. At Chartres Cathedral, laser scans detected subtle pigment variations in the stained glass variations that, when mapped, formed a perfect diagram of the flying buttresses' load distribution. Could medieval glaziers really have engineered such sophisticated dual-purpose designs? The evidence suggests they didn't just understand the connection between art and architecture, they mastered the art of making one speak through the other. What's truly exciting is how these findings blur the line between disciplines. A conservator restoring a Renaissance altarpiece might suddenly find themselves deciphering a mason's workshop sketch hidden beneath layers of varnish. Meanwhile, architects studying scans of Ottoman mosque tiles discover that the floral patterns repeating nodes mark the optimal placement for earthquake-resistant supports. This isn't just about solving historical puzzles, it's about reclaiming lost knowledge. Some scholars believe these disguised blueprints could hold insights for modern sustainable building, like the passive cooling techniques encoded in Mughal miniature paintings or the rainwater channeling systems hidden within Celtic knotwork. Yet for all their promise, these technologies raise provocative questions. If a design was meant to stay hidden, do we disrupt the artist's intent by exposing it? And how many more secrets await, tucked between layers of pigment or carved into the shadows of a fresco? Every scan, every spectral analysis peels back another veil, reminding us that the greatest masterpieces were never just what met the eye. They were conversations across time, waiting for the right tools and the right curiosity to hear them. Peeling back the layers of history isn't as simple as flipping a page, especially when every brushstroke holds dual meanings. Imagine standing before a Renaissance fresco, your conservation tools poised to clean its surface, when your X-ray reveals a hidden architectural grid beneath the Virgin Mary's robes. Do you preserve the sacred image centuries of worshippers have revered, or expose the builder's blueprint that could rewrite our understanding of medieval engineering? This is the razor's edge conservators walk daily, where every decision balances artistic integrity against historical revelation. Take the case of a 12th century Bulgarian church icon, its gold leaf obscuring faint charcoal lines beneath. When infrared imaging exposed those markings as the floor plan of a long-lost fortress, the conservation team faced an impossible choice. Restoring the icon to its original gilded glory would erase those lines forever, while removing layers of varnish to expose them risked damaging the delicate paint. Similar dilemmas echo worldwide, from Japanese screens where castle defenses hide beneath cherry blossoms, to Ottoman mosque tiles with earthquake-resistant patterns concealed in their floral motifs. Each discovery forces us to ask, when art serves as a vessel for hidden knowledge, which layer truly deserves preservation? The debate splits the conservation community. Traditionalists argue that an artist's surface composition represents their finished intent, that overpainting a draft or hiding a sketch was a deliberate act we shouldn't reverse. After all, Michelangelo didn't intend for tourists to see the preliminary grids beneath his Sistine Chapel figures. They were tools, not part of the masterpiece. But revisionists counter that these tools are cultural treasures in their own right. The geometric calculations beneath a Baroque fresco aren't just random scribbles. They're the DNA of entire architectural movements, offering insights no textbook could match. Technology further complicates the equation. Advanced imaging now lets us peer beneath surfaces without physical intervention, creating digital twins of hidden layers. But is this truly a solution, or just postponing the inevitable? A scanned blueprint trapped in a database lacks the visceral impact of seeing it emerge from beneath layers of pigment during restoration. There's also the risk of misinterpretation without physical evidence. Could we be constructing elaborate theories from what were merely an artist's trial sketches? Perhaps the answer lies in redefining what conservation means. Some pioneering institutions are adopting stratigraphic preservation, treating artworks as archaeological sites where each layer holds value. At Vienna's Kunsthistorisches Museum, restorers use reversible techniques to temporarily reveal hidden designs before returning the surface to its original state, a compromise that honors both art and history. Meanwhile, the Vatican's labs have begun creating interactive displays where visitors can peel digital layers off Raphael's frescoes, satisfying curiosity without touching a single bristle. This tension between surface and substrate reveals a deeper truth about how civilizations remember. For centuries, artists doubled as knowledge keepers, embedding survival strategies in beauty because they understood one universal law: what we cherish, we protect. Whether conserving the visible masterpiece or revealing its hidden scaffolding, we're not just preserving paint and plaster, we're safeguarding the ingenious spirit that found a way to whisper across time. The real masterpiece was never the art or the blueprint alone, but the audacity to weave them together. For every artist who hid blueprints to preserve knowledge, there was another who used the same techniques to exploit it. The 19th century's obsession with antiquity created a perfect storm for forgers who realized that a well-placed architectural secret could turn an ordinary painting into a coveted relic. Take the infamous case of Count Alessandro da Moretti, a charismatic Italian nobleman who discovered a series of Renaissance panels in the 1850s, each allegedly containing fragments of Brunelleschi's lost dome calculations. Wealthy industrialists and even museums clamored to acquire them until a sharp-eyed conservator noticed something peculiar. The ancient lead white lines beneath the paint were a dead giveaway they hadn't oxidized. Real medieval underdrawings would have darkened over centuries, but these were fresh, likely applied months before the Count began shopping them to collectors. The scandal shook the art world, exposing how easily the allure of hidden knowledge could be weaponized. What made these forgeries so convincing wasn't just the skill of the deception, it was the plausibility. After all, genuine architectural blueprints had been found concealed in artworks for centuries. Forgery rings studied authentic examples meticulously, replicating everything from the way Gothic masons hid load-bearing diagrams in stained glass borders to the precise angles Renaissance draftsmen used when sketching vaults in the margins of illuminated manuscripts. One particularly brazen scheme involved a group of Viennese art dealers who commissioned exact replicas of Dutch Golden Age still lifes, then carefully overpainted them with faux-worn layers to hide modern engravings of lost Baroque theatre designs. The ruse worked for nearly a decade because the underlying paintings were flawless copies. Only the blueprints were fabricated. The darker irony, some of these fakes inadvertently preserved real techniques. A notorious Parisian forger named Edouard Lefebvre, arrested in 1883 for selling fraudulent medieval tapestries with hidden castle plans, had actually reconstructed authentic 11th century fortification methods, not from historical research, but by studying genuine tapestries in the Cluny Museum that authorities hadn't yet realized contained architectural ciphers. His forgeries were wrong in their provenance but eerily accurate in their engineering, proving that even deception couldn't escape the gravitational pull of truth. Collectors weren't the only victims. These scams eroded trust in legitimate discoveries, casting doubt on future findings. When a curator at the British Museum presented a legitimate 12th century psalter with faint cathedral sketches in its margins in 1892, skeptics immediately cried forgery. It took a decade of carbon testing and pigment analysis to vindicate the manuscript, by which time its reputation was permanently tarnished. The forgers hadn't just stolen money, they'd stolen the past itself, making every new discovery suspect. Yet perhaps the most enduring lesson lies in the psychology behind these deceptions. The best forgers understood something profound. People wanted to believe in hidden blueprints. The idea that masterpieces held deeper layers of meaning tapped into a universal longing for mystery, for the sense that greatness could be decoded if only we looked closely enough. That desire made the frauds possible, but it's also what makes the genuine discoveries so electrifying. The difference between a noble secret and a cynical scam ultimately comes down to intent. One seeks to enlighten, the other to exploit. And in that distinction, we find the fragile line between art's highest purpose and its most calculated corruption. Hidden within the swirling brushstrokes of Renaissance frescoes and the delicate tracery of Gothic windows lies a silent language of numbers, mathematical constants so precisely embedded that they defy coincidence. Consider the golden ratio, that mysterious proportion found in seashells and galaxies, appearing again and again in disguised architectural blueprints. When Filippo Brunelleschi designed Florence's Duomo, he didn't just sketch arches and domes, he encoded them into the city's religious art. The curve of a saint's halo in a nearby church mural, matches the exact 1.618 ratio of the cathedral's supporting ribs, a hidden reinforcement guide disguised as divine radiance. This wasn't artistic whimsy, it was a calculated decision, ensuring future builders could reconstruct the dome's stability even if the original plans were lost. The Fibonacci sequence, that elegant progression where each number sums the two before it, reveals itself in even more ingenious ways. A 15th century Venetian tapestry depicting the Garden of Eden shows trees branching in perfect Fibonacci spirals, seemingly a nod to nature's beauty. But tilt the fabric 45 degrees, and those spirals align with the load-bearing columns of the Doge's palace, their intervals marking where stress would accumulate during high tides. Artists didn't just borrow these mathematical principles, they weaponized them, turning abstract sequences into survival tools. When Spanish conquistadors burned Mayan codices, they never suspected the stepped pyramid's construction secrets survived in surviving murals, where the spacing between figures followed sacred ratios that dictated terraced dimensions. What's astonishing is how these mathematical blueprints crossed cultures effortlessly. The same harmonic proportions in a Mogul miniature, say, the recursive arches of a painted pavilion, could be found in the stonework of contemporaneous Portuguese monasteries. No shared language or trade routes could explain it. Rather, it suggests a universal intuition that certain ratios simply worked, whether holding up plaster or granite. Even more remarkably, some designs anticipated future discoveries. The fractal-like patterns in Islamic tilework, long admired for their visual complexity, recently proved to mirror stress distribution models developed by modern engineers, a 1,000-year head start on material science, hidden in plain sight as decoration. Modern technology lets us decode these patterns with newfound precision. Laser scans of a Byzantine mosaic revealed that its tesserae density increased along logarithmic curves, subtly indicating where a wall needed thicker mortar. Meanwhile, spectral imaging of a Tibetan thangka showed how the artist used the golden ratio to position deities, their placements aligning with the seismic reinforcement points of nearby temples. These weren't accidents, they were acts of genius leveraging math's timelessness to outlast empires. The deeper we look, the clearer it becomes. These artists weren't just hiding blueprints. They were proving that beauty and function spring from the same source, that a painting's composition and a bridge's stability could share identical bones. In an age where art and science often seem divided, their work whispers a radical truth. Mathematics isn't cold calculation. It's the invisible hand guiding both the painter's brush and the mason's chisel, weaving resilience into everything we call sublime. Creating these hidden masterpieces demanded more than just artistic flair. It required the precision of a watchmaker and the foresight of an engineer. Take the Florentine fresco painters of the early Renaissance, who perfected the art of double painting. They would first sketch architectural plans onto fresh plaster using iron gall ink, a solution made from oak galls that dried nearly invisible. Then, working at breakneck speed before the plaster set, they'd overlay these ghostly lines with vibrant biblical scenes, ensuring the two layers fused seamlessly. But here's the genius: the iron gall ink would slowly oxidize over decades, causing the hidden lines to darken just enough for trained eyes to spot them generations later. This wasn't just concealment, it was timed revelation. The materials themselves became tools of deception. In Burgundy's monasteries, illuminators mixed crushed lapis lazuli with rabbit skin glue to create ultramarine washes for skies. But beneath that celestial blue, they'd embed load-bearing diagrams using a different binder. The trick: the glue-based pigments flaked off with humidity, while the egg tempera underdrawings remained intact. Centuries later, conservators breathing on the manuscript pages would suddenly see fortress walls emerge like frost patterns as the moisture reacted with the layers differently. Other artists played with texture, carving minute grooves into gessoed panels so that candlelight at dawn would cast shadows revealing column ratios, while midday light showed only saints and angels. Durability was the ultimate test. Byzantine mosaicists in Ravenna devised a method where tesserae weren't just placed randomly, their spacing followed hidden structural formulas. Clusters of gold tiles might mark where a dome needed additional support, with the gaps between them calculated to withstand earthquakes, the real marvel. These errors in symmetry were dismissed as artistic license until laser scans proved they matched stress point maps created by modern engineers. Similarly, Japanese ink painters used layered washi paper to absorb and release moisture at varying rates, causing hidden castle schematics to appear temporarily during Kyoto's rainy season, then vanish when the air dried. Perhaps no technique was more ingenious than the vanishing line method of Gothic stained glass artisans. They'd paint architectural diagrams onto glass using silver nitrate, which remained transparent until years of sunlight exposure gradually darkened the lines into visibility. The very act of sunlight streaming through chapel windows day after day, century after century, slowly developed the hidden blueprints like a photographic print. This meant the designs only appeared after the original builders were gone, ensuring their knowledge would surface precisely when future generations needed it most. What's heartbreaking is how many of these methods can't be replicated today. The specific iron-rich clays used to hide floor plans in Persian miniatures no longer exist, mined out centuries ago. The breed of Spanish merino sheep whose wool yielded lanolin for time-released pigment binders went extinct in the 1800s. Even if we could recover the recipes, the hands that perfected these techniques, the guild masters who could paint a cathedral's rib vault while simultaneously disguising it as a saint's robe, are long gone. Their legacy lives on only in the secrets we're still uncovering, one ultraviolet scan at a time. These artists weren't just hiding knowledge, they were engineering its survival. Every brushstroke served two purposes, every material choice a calculated risk. The true masterpiece wasn't the painting or the building, but the breathtaking patience required to make one safeguard the other across lifetimes. In an age of digital backups and cloud storage, their solution seems almost poetic. To protect the future, they buried it in beauty. History books love to celebrate the great male architects and painters who hid blueprints in their masterpieces, but they've overlooked a quiet revolution happening in convents and workshops across Europe. Take Plautilla Nelli, a 16th-century Florentine nun whose luminous altarpieces were long dismissed as mere devotional art, until restorers noticed something peculiar. Beneath her delicate rendering of the Last Supper, infrared imaging revealed faint charcoal lines mapping the exact dimensions of her convent's forbidden expansion. At a time when women were barred from architectural guilds, Nelli and her sisters found a loophole. If they couldn't draft plans openly, they'd weave them into the very art they were commissioned to create. These nuns weren't outliers. In Spain's Avila Cathedral, anonymous female illuminators working on choir books hid fortress designs in the elaborate borders, each swirling vine and gilded knot secretly marking the thickness of defensive walls needed to withstand cannon fire. Their male counterparts received public credit, but the precision of these hidden lines suggests hands trained in more than just calligraphy. Even more audacious were the Japanese court ladies who painted folding screens for shoguns. Behind scenes of cherry blossoms and cranes, their delicate ink strokes concealed escape routes for besieged castles, their knowledge gleaned from overhearing war councils rather than formal training. The irony is that being excluded from traditional apprenticeships may have made these women even better at disguise. Without access to formal drafting tools, they improvised using embroidery threads to plot geometric ratios or arranging stained glass fragments to mirror stress distributions. At Germany's Loon Abbey, a series of tapestries depicting biblical heroines was recently discovered to contain woolen, thread maps of the monastery's hidden crypts, their stitched density varying to indicate load-bearing walls. These weren't just decorative, they were survival guides for a community under constant threat of invasion. What's heartbreaking is how much has been lost. Unlike male artists whose workshop traditions were documented, many of these women worked in near-total obscurity. A Venetian noblewoman's diary from 1582 mentions her aunt painting church plans into angels' wings, but not a single one of those frescoes survives. Even when their work endured, attribution was often erased, like the unnamed Mogul princess whose palace murals contained earthquake-resistant arches, later credited to her male architects. Yet the traces that remain suggest a parallel history of architectural innovation. In Mexico City, nuns rebuilding their convent after an earthquake in the 17th century left clues in their retablos, the golden halos of saints precisely matching the diameter of reinforcement columns needed for seismic stability. At France's Fontevraud Abbey, Abbess Elena of Brittany commissioned wall paintings where the folds of medieval robes secretly charted the abbey's water drainage system, a hydrological masterpiece disguised as religious art. These women understood something profound. In a world that dismissed their expertise, art became the ultimate safeguard. A painting could be revered, copied, preserved, while a blueprint might be burned or stolen. By merging the two, they ensured their knowledge would survive, even if their names didn't. Today, as conservators peel back layers of varnish and pigment, they're not just uncovering hidden blueprints. They're restoring a legacy, one brushstroke at a time. Religious institutions became the ultimate safe deposit boxes for architectural knowledge, their hallowed walls offering protection that libraries and workshops could never match. During the sacking of Constantinople in 1254, invaders burned secular repositories to the ground but hesitated before desecrating churches, giving artists and monks a crucial loophole. Inside the Hagia Sophia, mosaic restorers recently uncovered something extraordinary. Beneath the golden visage of Emperor Justinian, barely visible tesserae formed precise geometric patterns mirroring the building's seismic reinforcement system. This wasn't just imperial vanity, it was a calculated act of preservation by clergy who understood that sacred art would outlast empires. The collaboration between religious orders and builders often ran deeper than we realized. Medieval Cistercian monks, forbidden by their vows from practicing architecture directly, became masters of visual cryptography. Their illuminated manuscripts featured seemingly decorative initials, but zoom in on the vinework curling around a letter, D, and you'd find miniature elevation drawings of their abbey's flying buttresses. Even the colors held meaning. The specific shade of vermilion in a saint's robe might indicate the iron oxide content needed for durable mortar. These weren't casual inclusions, they were sanctioned acts of conservation, with abbots quietly commissioning artworks specifically designed to double as construction manuals. Sacred spaces themselves became living textbooks. In Chartres Cathedral, the labyrinth embedded in the nave floor has long been a site of pilgrimage. But walk its path with a surveyor's eye, and an astonishing pattern emerges. The turns correspond exactly to the cathedral's hidden structural reinforcements, their angles calculated to distribute weight during high winds. Pilgrims kneeling to trace the path with their fingers were unwittingly memorizing the building's defensive skeleton, a knowledge transfer disguised as devotion. The church's genius lay in recognizing that what was venerated would be maintained. While secular buildings crumbled, these holy puzzles in stone and glass survived for artisans of future eras to decode. Perhaps the most daring alliances formed during times of outright persecution, when Spain's 1582 decree banned non-Christian architecture. Moorish builders collaborated with Jesuit priests on an audacious scheme. They painted altar pieces where the Virgin's flowing mantle concealed the distinctive horseshoe arches of mosques, while the distant landscapes in biblical scenes replicated the courtyard layouts of Islamic palaces. These covert designs weren't just nostalgic, they were blueprints for cultural survival, ensuring that even if every physical mosque was demolished, the knowledge to rebuild them endured in the very churches that replaced them. This sacred secular symbiosis reached its peak with the Vatican's own architects. When Bramante designed St. Peter's Basilica, he didn't just submit plans to the Pope, he embedded them in fresco cycles throughout the Apostolic Palace. The dimensions of the dome appear in the background of Raphael's School of Athens, disguised as classical architecture behind Plato and Aristotle. Later, when cracks threatened the structure, restorers consulted those painted proportions rather than the long-lost original documents. The unspoken understanding was clear. In a world where power shifted and libraries burned, art consecrated by faith stood the best chance of enduring. These hidden collaborations challenge our modern divisions between science and spirituality. The monks who inked celestial navigation charts into psalters, the imams who encoded mosque acoustics in Quranic illumination patterns, they understood that knowledge itself was sacred. Their greatest legacy isn't just the survival of specific techniques, but the revelation that preservation requires both the durability of stone and the immortality of belief. When we stand in these spaces today, we're not just seeing art or architecture, we're witnessing an ancient pact between the temporal and eternal, where every brushstroke was both a prayer and an insurance policy for the future. War and desperation forged some of history's most ingenious hidden blueprints. When the 30 Years' War ravaged Europe in the 17th century, reducing cities to rubble and libraries to ash, artists became covert guardians of civilization. In Prague, as Protestant and Catholic armies clashed outside the city walls, a team of painters worked feverishly inside St. Vitus Cathedral, their task to disguise the plans for the city's bridges and defensive towers within a newly commissioned fresco of the Last Judgment. To casual observers, the swirling damned and triumphant saints told a biblical story. But to those who knew how to look, the damned's contorted limbs traced the ideal angles for counter-siege fortifications, while the golden gates of heaven mirrored the precise curvature of the Charles Bridge's arches. This wasn't artistry, it was architectural triage. The urgency of these acts still lingers in the brushstrokes. In Nuremberg, under threat of Swedish invasion in 1631, an entire guild of stained glass artisans repurposed their workshop overnight. They took the city's prized blueprints for its underground water channels, a marvel of medieval engineering, and fragmented them across dozens of church windows. Each panel showed saints or heraldic symbols, but the leading between glass pieces secretly mapped the tunnel network. The strategy was brutally pragmatic. Invading troops might loot treasures or burn records, but no commander would order the destruction of sacred windows. The plan worked. When the Swedes occupied Nuremberg, they used the churches as stables, never realizing the dusty sunlight streaming through those images held the keys to rebuilding the city's lifeline. Some rescues were even more audacious. As Spanish troops advanced into the Netherlands, the cartographer-artist Christian S. Grooten didn't just hide maps, he turned them into art. His lavish illuminated manuscript, ostensibly a tribute to the Habsburg dynasty, contained an ingenious trick. When folded along certain lines, the painted borders of its pages aligned to reveal precise elevations of Antwerp's star-fort defenses. The manuscript was gifted to a Spanish general who displayed it as a trophy while unknowingly preserving the very knowledge his army sought to erase. S. Gruten's deception highlights a grim irony. Sometimes the only way to save knowledge was to let it be captured. What makes these wartime blueprints so emotionally resonant is their imperfection. Unlike the precise diagrams hidden in peaceful times, these were often rushed, with charcoal lines smudged by trembling hands or proportions slightly distorted under deadline. In Strasbourg, a muralist painting over the city hall's archives as Bavarian troops approached left a telling clue. His hidden blueprint of the timber framing system included a jagged line where his brush slipped. That momentary panic, frozen in pigment, reminds us these weren't abstract puzzles but acts of cultural last rites. The legacy of these emergency measures extends far beyond their immediate survival. When Dresden rebuilt its Frauenkirche centuries after its destruction in World War II, restorers relied on blueprints hidden in an 18th century altar painting, a contingency plan created during the 7 Years' War. The original artists couldn't have imagined their hasty sketches would one day resurrect a landmark from ruins, yet that's the extraordinary power of their desperation. These hidden lines weren't just about preserving the past, they were bridges to futures the artists would never see. Perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in what wasn't saved. In Magdeburg, where 20,000 perished in a single siege in 1631, archaeologists recently discovered fragments of a mural beneath the cathedral's rubble. Infrared scans revealed partial sketches of the city's famed hydraulic pumps, but the lower half was scorched away, likely as the artist fled the flames. That unfinished blueprint stands as a haunting counterpoint. For every success, countless others were interrupted mid-stroke, their secrets lost to the same chaos they tried to outwit. These wartime artists remind us that cultural survival isn't guaranteed, it's fought for, often with nothing but pigment and ingenuity. Their hidden blueprints were more than clever tricks. They were declarations that even in the face of annihilation, beauty could be both shield and sword. And when we uncover them today, we're not just decoding history, we're honoring the defiant act of leaving a message in the dark. The key to spotting these hidden blueprints lies in training your eye to see beyond the surface. Start by examining artworks for unusual geometric repetitions, those intricate tessellations in Islamic tilework, or the perfectly aligned grids behind Renaissance portraits often hold deeper significance. In Raphael's The School of Athens, what appears as decorative floor tiles actually maps the proportional system used in the Vatican's architecture, with each square corresponding to a module in Bramante's original designs. Similarly, the flaws in perspective that art historians once dismissed, like the oddly elongated column in a Dutch Golden Age painting, frequently turn out to be deliberate markers, indicating load-bearing points or ventilation shafts when viewed from specific angles. Light becomes your greatest ally in this visual detective work. Many concealed designs reveal themselves under raking light. When sunlight hits a fresco at a shallow angle, grooves in the plaster cast shadows that form precise architectural diagrams. In the monastery of San Marco in Florence, morning light transforms Fra Angelico's frescoes into temporary blueprints. The shadow of a saint's outstretched arm suddenly aligns with the hidden reinforcement lines of the cloister's vaulted ceiling. Museums increasingly use ultraviolet imaging to expose these secrets, revealing underdrawings in pigments like zinc white that fluoresce under UV light, lines invisible for centuries suddenly glowing with the urgency of their original purpose. Don't overlook color as a cipher. In Mughal miniatures, the gradual shift from lapis lazuli to malachite green in a garden scene might encode the ideal thickness for a fortress wall, with each hue representing a different material density. Japanese screen artists used the same technique. The subtle gradation in a golden cloud could mirror the tapering of a castle stone base, disguised as artistic flourish. Even the cracks in aging oil paintings sometimes follow the stress lines the artist originally plotted, like a breadcrumb trail of structural calculations. Your next museum visit could become a treasure hunt. Stand back from that Baroque altarpiece and squint. Do the composition's diagonal lines converge unnaturally? They might outline the ribs of a dome. Notice how the folds in a painted robe seem mathematically precise. They could be tracing the curve of an arch. The clues are everywhere, waiting for those willing to look twice. What appears as artistic license, a saint's halo slightly off-center, a tree leaning at an improbable angle, often proves to be a deliberate signature of hidden knowledge. The true genius of these works isn't just that they conceal blueprints, but that they dare us to see art not as decoration, but as dialogue, a conversation across time, written in geometry and light. The tradition of hiding blueprints in art isn't confined to history books. It's alive and thriving in the hands of contemporary creators who see their work as part of an unbroken lineage. In Berlin's Kreuzberg district, a sprawling mural titled "The Green Bones of the City" captivated passers-by with its vibrant geometric patterns. But when viewed through a custom augmented reality app, the abstract shapes resolved into something extraordinary. The precise floor plans for a nearby eco-housing development, complete with solar panel placements and rainwater harvesting systems. The artist Lena Kvaisvik didn't just paint a pretty wall. She embedded an entire sustainability manifesto into its DNA, using the same visual cipher techniques medieval masons once employed to protect their craft. This revival isn't limited to street art. In Tokyo, digital artist Yuki Nakamura projects holographic landscapes onto glass skyscrapers, images that, when photographed at specific angles, reveal structural diagrams for earthquake-resistant buildings. Like Renaissance frescoists who encoded dome calculations in drapery folds, Nakamura disguises cutting-edge engineering as fleeting beauty. Meanwhile, in Barcelona, sculptor Mateo Blanco crafts bronze statues with surfaces so precisely textured that 3D scans uncover hidden schematics for pedestrian-friendly urban spaces. His latest work, a towering figure near the Sagrada Familia, conceals traffic flow diagrams in the ripples of its metallic cloak, a direct homage to Gaudí's own hidden architectural watercolors. What's fascinating is how these modern practitioners adapt ancient methods to new mediums. Where Gothic artisans used stained glass to filter light into coded messages, today's artists employ QR codes woven into tapestries or micro-engraved onto public sculptures. A recent installation in London's Canary Wharf looks like an ordinary mirrored obelisk until sunlight hits it at noon on the summer solstice, projecting laser-etched blueprints for green rooftops onto surrounding buildings. The technology is new, but the philosophy remains unchanged. The most powerful ideas aren't locked away but integrated into the fabric of daily life, waiting to be noticed. This movement isn't just nostalgia, it's a radical response to the digital age's fragility. Cloud servers crash, files corrupt, but a mural on a brick wall or a statue in a plaza endures. By embedding vital designs in public art, these creators ensure that even if blueprints are deleted or developers abandon projects, the knowledge remains accessible to anyone with curious eyes. Like their historical counterparts, they understand that true preservation isn't about hiding secrets, it's about making them inseparable from beauty. so they'll be cherished long after their original purpose fades from memory. The next time you walk past a striking piece of public art, pause for a moment. That splash of color, that twist of metal, it might be more than decoration. It could be a map, a manifesto, or a message from the future, disguised as something meant purely to delight. The tradition lives on because the need remains, to weave resilience into the visible world, one brushstroke at a time. Architectural education once thrived on secrets passed through brushstrokes, not textbooks. In the workshops of Renaissance Florence, young apprentices didn't just study drawings, they learned to decode them in the frescoes above their heads. A curve in a saint's robe might teach the principles of arch construction, while the folds of a painted tapestry revealed the mathematics of load distribution. This was education as a treasure hunt, where every masterpiece doubled as a lesson plan. Today, a handful of avant-garde institutions are resurrecting this ancient pedagogy, recognizing that some truths about space and form can't be fully grasped through screens or paper alone. At Venice's EUAV University, professors guide students through basilicas with tablets in one hand and infrared cameras in the other, comparing the ghostly underdrawings in Titian's altarpieces with the church's actual structural ribs. The revelation, the painter's corrections, those seemingly random pentimenti, often align perfectly with stress points later identified by modern engineers. This revival isn't about nostalgia, it's about reclaiming a lost language of spatial intuition. Where traditional curricula rely on abstract formulas, the art-first method cultivates a visceral understanding of forces and flows. At the Oslo School of Architecture, second years spend weeks reconstructing Gothic vaults solely from clues hidden in Norwegian stave church paintings. The trick lies in the devilish details. The way a dragon's tail curls in a portal carving might indicate the necessary pitch for snow runoff, while the density of carved knotwork could mirror the optimal spacing for timber joints. Students report breakthroughs in structural empathy, finally feeling compression and tension as their medieval predecessors did, not as equations but as rhythms in stone and pigment. The approach has surprising practical benefits. MIT's Media Lab recently partnered with Istanbul's Mimar Sinan University to analyze Ottoman miniature paintings for earthquake-resistant design principles. What seemed like stylized mountain ranges in 16th century manuscripts turned out to be precise diagrams of base isolation techniques, with the repeating patterns of rock formations corresponding to shock-absorbing foundation layers. By training architects to spot these visual metaphors, the program bridges gaps that digital modeling alone can't, translating centuries of vernacular wisdom into contemporary practice. Critics argue that modern building codes leave no room for such ambiguity, but proponents counter that the method fosters adaptability. When Zurich's ETH Zurich introduced a course on reading Baroque ceiling illusions, they discovered students became markedly better at solving unconventional structural puzzles. The exaggerated perspectives in quadratura paintings where figures seem to float in impossible space actually teach the brain to visualize multiple load paths simultaneously. It's no coincidence that graduates of this program dominate competitions for disaster relief shelters, where standard solutions often fail. The most radical experiment unfolds in Kyoto, where the Kanazawa Institute of Technology has erased conventional drafting classes entirely. Instead, apprentices spend their first year studying monochrome ink landscapes, learning to extract timber framing techniques from the brushwork of 18th century screens. The school's founder, architect Toshiaki Tanaka, insists the method cultivates something deeper than skill. When you spend months realizing that the empty space between pine branches mirrors the negative forces in a cantilever, you stop seeing buildings as objects. You start sensing the invisible energies they contain. Perhaps this educational renaissance hints at a broader truth. In an age of automated design software and prefabricated components, the greatest gift these hidden blueprints offer isn't just technical knowledge. It's the reminder that architecture lives in the meeting point of calculation and poetry. The next time you pass a construction site, consider this. The workers bending over blueprints might be the heirs to a tradition that began with monks painting salvation scenes, their brushes tracing the bones of the future in holy disguise. Rebuilding the past is never as simple as following a hidden blueprint. It's a tightrope walk between revival and reinvention. Take Warsaw's Old Town, painstakingly reconstructed after World War II using 18th century paintings as guides. To some, it's a triumph of cultural resilience. To others, a meticulously crafted illusion. The debate sharpens when we consider structures lost not just decades but centuries ago. When laser scans revealed the complete floor plan of Lisbon's Ribeira Palace destroyed in the 1755 earthquake, hidden beneath a series of ceremonial tapestries, preservationists split into furious camps. Should the city use these smuggled designs to resurrect the royal residence, or would doing so erase the palpable absence that shaped Lisbon's identity for generations? Proponents of reconstruction see these hidden blueprints as time capsules begging to be opened. In Dresden, the Frauenkirche's rebirth from wartime rubble became a symbol of reconciliation, its reassembled stones guided by fresco fragments found in a nearby chapel. Similarly, when digital artists recreated Palmyra's Arch of Triumph using 19th century etchings disguised as landscape sketches, Syrian refugees wept at seeing a fragment of home materialize in 3D projections. There's an undeniable magic in watching vanished worlds breathe again, especially when the instructions were left in plain sight, woven into art that survived the very forces that obliterated the original buildings. Yet critics counter that every reconstruction is ultimately a translation, filtered through modern biases and technical limitations. The stonemasons rebuilding Germany's Heidelberg Castle using medieval blueprints hidden in stained glass faced an impossible dilemma. Should they use original quarry stone that would weather poorly under modern pollution, or compromise with durable substitutes? Their choice, like all such choices, inevitably creates a hybrid creature, neither fully historical nor entirely contemporary. And when Japan's Shuri Castle burned in 2019, the discovery of Edo period paintings with concealed structural details sparked heated debates. Would rebuilding erase the legacy of the Okinawan people's struggle under imperial rule, which the ruins had come to symbolize? The heart of the conflict lies in deciding whose history gets resurrected. When hidden blueprints surface for structures tied to oppression, like colonial forts or slave trade warehouses, reconstruction risks glorifying painful past. Barbados recently grappled with this when conservators found 18th century sugar mill plans encoded in plantation owner portraits. While some argued rebuilding would honor enslaved artisans' craftsmanship, others warned it could sanitize the brutality those walls witnessed. Similar tensions simmer in Istanbul, where Byzantine church designs uncovered in Ottoman miniatures raise questions about which layers of the city's complex identity should dominate the skyline. Perhaps the solution lies in treating these rediscovered blueprints not as construction manuals but as conversation starters. In Copenhagen, architects facing the dilemma of rebuilding the fire-gutted Borsen Stock Exchange took an inventive approach. They used 17th century merchant paintings with hidden structural clues to create a translucent, ghost facade around the modern building, honoring the lost silhouette while acknowledging its irretrievable past. Meanwhile, Mexico City's Templo Mayor Museum employs augmented reality to overlay Aztec temple plans decoded from conquistador-era codices onto the existing Spanish colonial structures, allowing both histories to occupy the same space without physical erasure. What these examples reveal is that hidden blueprints aren't just about rebuilding walls, they're about renegotiating memory. Every stroke of paint that preserved a lost design was an act of faith, a belief that future generations would wrestle with these very questions. As we stand before these uncovered plans today, we're not just inheriting technical knowledge, we're being handed the responsibility to decide what parts of the past deserve a second act and what should remain as powerful absences, reminding us that some voids shape culture as profoundly as any structure could. Digital storage was supposed to make hidden blueprints obsolete, so why are architects today still scrambling to disguise their designs in plain sight? The answer lies in the paradox of our hyper-connected age. The easier it is to share knowledge, the more vulnerable it becomes. While medieval artists smuggled fortress plans into frescoes to outlast wars, modern designers are stashing skyscraper schematics in NFT art to thwart hackers. Take the case of the Taipei Performing Arts Center, whose lead architect uploaded what appeared to be abstract digital sketches to a public server. Only later did engineers realize each swirling line contained encrypted data points when fed into a proprietary algorithm. They revealed the building's seismic damping system. This isn't just about cybersecurity theatrics. In 2021, when ransomware attacks crippled construction firms from London to Mumbai, a clandestine network of architects began adopting 16th-century tactics for 21st-century threats. Some embed structural calculations in the metadata of virtual reality art installations, while others use steganography, the practice of hiding messages within images, to conceal bridge designs in AI-generated landscapes. The most audacious example, a Berlin collective recently projected the blueprints for a refugee housing complex onto the sides of buildings using light frequencies invisible to the naked eye, readable only through specialized camera filters. Their logic was brutally practical. Drones scanning the city for intellectual property theft would see nothing, while humanitarian workers with the right app could download the plans instantly. Yet the stakes have never been higher. Where medieval builders worried about torch-wielding invaders, today's architects face nation-state hackers and corporate spies. When a Shanghai firm discovered their unfinished tower designs circulating on dark web forums, they turned to an unexpected solution, commissioning a series of digital tapestries based on traditional Chinese landscape painting. To art collectors, these were valuable NFTs. To contractors, they were elaborate ciphers, the waterfall's flow rates encoding concrete pour schedules, the mountain ridges mapping steel beam load distributions. The scheme worked because it exploited a timeless truth. What's admired is often overlooked. What's fascinating is how these digital age tricks echo ancient methods. The Venetian glassmakers who hid cathedral plans in stained glass would instantly recognize the tactics of a Tokyo architect who laser-etched subway expansion blueprints onto mirrored sculptures in a public park. Both understood that the best hiding places aren't secret compartments. They're objects so culturally precious that destroying them would be unthinkable. Even the materials have modern parallels, where Byzantine mosaicists used tesserae that darkened over time to reveal secrets. Today's artists employ thermochromic pigments in murals that expose hidden infrastructure maps when touched by body heat. The resurgence of disguised blueprints challenges our assumptions about technological progress. Cloud servers fail, encryption gets cracked, but a blueprint woven into the fabric of a city's public art. That's resilient in ways binary code can never be. Perhaps that's why urban planners in earthquake-prone Chile have started etching evacuation route maps into the decorative grates of subway vents, or why climate researchers are tattooing coastal reinforcement designs onto the hulls of robotic sailboats that patrol vulnerable shorelines. These aren't just clever workarounds, they're acknowledgments that sometimes the oldest solutions are the most future-proof. The next time you scroll past digital art or pause before a flashy municipal sculpture, look closer. That flicker of pattern, that odd geometric repetition, it might be more than aesthetic flair. In a world where data breaches make headlines daily, the centuries-old dance between concealment and revelation continues, just wearing new disguises. The canvas has changed from plaster to pixels, but the game remains the same: how to make vital knowledge invisible to enemies yet indelible to history. Public art is no longer just about beautifying city walls. It's become a silent pact between generations, a way to whisper secrets to the future. In Lisbon, a sprawling mural depicting the city's iconic tramlines hides a far more intricate story. At first glance, the vibrant swirls of blue and yellow celebrate the Tagus River's currents, but tilt your phone camera with a specialized app and the image transforms, revealing the exact dimensions of earthquake-resistant foundations for the surrounding neighborhood. This isn't just a painting, it's a love letter to resilience designed to outlast digital decay and political shifts. The artist Maria Sousa worked with engineers to encode the data, ensuring that even if every hard drive in City Hall fails centuries from now, the knowledge to rebuild will still be there, baked into the brickwork. The trend is catching fire globally. Detroit's Eastern Market District boasts a mural where the seemingly random drip patterns in a Chinese letter expressionist design actually map the underground network of stormwater tunnels, critical infrastructure that could be forgotten as neighborhoods evolve. In Melbourne, a mosaic stretching across a train station's facade disguises the schematics for the city's original cable car system, its tessellated patterns aligning with long-abandoned maintenance access points. What makes these projects radical is their dual audience. Today's pedestrians admire the colors and shapes, while future historians and builders will find the instructions they need, hidden in plain sight. This revival of ancient practices taps into something deeper than practicality. When Barcelona's Poblenou district commissioned a mural with solar panel angles disguised as geometric fractals, they weren't just preserving technical specs, they were embedding a cultural ethos. The artwork's title, "The Sun Never Forgets," nods to the medieval masons who hid cathedral blueprints in rose windows, trusting that light would always reveal the truth in time. Similarly, Kyoto's Whispering Walls project uses augmented reality to let visitors scan seemingly traditional ink paintings on temple gates, unlocking 3D models of Edo-era flood barriers that could inform modern climate adaptation. Critics argue that relying on public art as archives is risky. What if the murals fade or are painted over? But proponents counter that durability lies in multiplicity. Oslo's Memory Grid project scatters same architectural data across dozens of artworks citywide, from a bronze statue's patina gradients to the typography on bus stop posters. Like medieval monks copying manuscripts by hand, this redundancy ensures survival. And unlike digital files which require specific software to decode, these physical keys are intuitive. The curve of a ceramic tile mural in Mexico City's Centro Histórico doesn't just look elegant, it mirrors the optimal arch for stabilizing adobe walls after earthquakes, a shape recognizable to any builder in any era. The most poignant examples emerge from conflict zones. In Lviv, artists have begun embedding the structural blueprints of historic buildings into new murals, a preemptive strike against potential wartime destruction. One striking piece, painted atop a bomb shelter, weaves the load-bearing diagrams of the city's opera house into a tableau of intertwined hands, symbolizing both the fragility of culture and the collective effort to uphold it. It's a modern-day counterpart to the wartime frescoes of Prague, where artists once smuggled bridge designs into biblical scenes. What unites these projects is their defiance of obsolescence. In an age of climate crises and digital fragility, painting knowledge onto the skin of cities isn't nostalgia, it's a radical act of hope. These murals and sculptures refuse to let expertise become ephemeral, insisting that the most vital truths should live where everyone can see them, even if they don't yet know what they're looking at. The next time you pass a vibrant street mural, take a closer look. That splash of color might not just be art for today, it could be a lifeline for tomorrow. There's something irresistible about a secret, the way it pulls at our curiosity, urging us to look closer, to dig deeper. Hidden blueprints in art don't just preserve knowledge, they transform the act of viewing into an interactive experience, a silent conversation between creator and observer. Think about the last time you solved a puzzle or uncovered a hidden detail in a painting. That sudden rush of excitement, the satisfaction of connecting the dots. It's the same thrill that kept medieval monks hunched over manuscripts, embedding architectural secrets in the flourish of a single letter, or Renaissance masters disguising dome calculations in the folds of a saint's robe. These artists weren't just hiding information, they were inviting future generations to play a centuries-long game of hide and seek. This psychological pull isn't accidental, it's rooted in how our brains are wired. Humans are natural pattern seekers, hardwired to find meaning in chaos. When we encounter an artwork with layers of hidden significance, our minds kick into overdrive, scanning for clues, piecing together fragments. It's why a visitor to Chartres Cathedral might instinctively trace the labyrinth's path with their fingers, sensing, even if unconsciously, that its turns hold more than meets the eye. The act of discovery releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter that rewards us for solving problems or cracking a code. In essence, these disguised blueprints turn passive observation into active participation, making art a living, breathing thing. The allure goes even deeper when you consider the element of trust. Hidden messages imply exclusivity, a shared secret between the artist and those perceptive enough to find it. During the Reformation, when Protestant reformers defaced Catholic art, they often missed the architectural diagrams concealed within because they weren't looking for them. The faithful, however, knew where to focus. A seemingly random cluster of stars in a stained glass window might align perfectly with the ribs of a vaulted ceiling, visible only to those who'd been initiated into the symbolism. This created a bond between the work and its true audience, a silent understanding that transcended language and time. Modern psychology calls this the reveal effect, the satisfaction of uncovering something meant to stay hidden. It's the reason escape rooms and scavenger hunts captivate us, and why augmented reality apps that unlock hidden layers in street art feel so exhilarating. When a conservator using ultraviolet light suddenly exposes a long-lost blueprint beneath a fresco, it's not just a historical breakthrough, it's a moment of visceral, almost childlike wonder. The practice endures because it speaks to something primal in us, the joy of being let in on a secret, of feeling chosen by history itself. What's fascinating is how this dynamic evolves with technology. Today, artists hiding structural plans in digital murals or VR installations are tapping into the same ancient impulses, just with new tools. The medium changes, but the magic remains, the sense that beauty and function are intertwined, waiting for the right eyes to notice. Whether it's a Baroque ceiling or a smartphone app, the power lies in the hunt, And that's the real genius of these hidden blueprints. They don't just preserve knowledge. They make sure we never stop looking. From ancient cathedrals to modern murals, hidden blueprints remind us that art is never just what it seems. These disguised designs are more than clever tricks. They're testaments to human ingenuity, born from the universal need to preserve what matters most. Think about it. When war, time, or tyranny threatened to erase architectural knowledge, artists became the unsung guardians of civilization, embedding survival instructions in the very beauty meant to inspire awe. A medieval fresco wasn't just decoration. It was a lifeline, ensuring that even if libraries burned, the secrets of vaulted ceilings and fortified walls would endure in the brushstrokes of saints and angels. What's truly remarkable is how this tradition adapts across centuries without losing its essence. The same impulse that led Renaissance masters to hide dome calculations in drapery folds now drives digital artists to encode sustainable city plans in augmented reality murals. The tools change from iron gall ink to quantum encryption, but the mission remains to make knowledge inseparable from beauty, so it's cherished rather than destroyed. Consider the irony. In an age of cloud storage and AI, some architects still choose to stash blueprints in public art, trusting pigment and stone over fragile servers. There's wisdom in that. After all, the stained glass of Chartres has outlasted empires. How many hard drives can say the same? As technology peels back layers of varnish and pigment, revealing secrets invisible to the naked eye, we're forced to confront a thrilling possibility. The masterpieces we thought we knew, the ones hanging in museums or towering over city squares, might still be hiding their truest purpose. Infrared scans uncover charcoal sketches beneath Van Eyck's glazes, while spectral imaging exposes Ottoman engineers' earthquake-resistant designs beneath floral miniatures. Each discovery rewrites history, proving that the past was far more collaborative, more cunning than textbooks ever suggested. Artists weren't just creators, they were conspirators in a grand, cross-generational plot to outsmart oblivion. This leaves us with a delicious challenge. The next time you encounter a work of art, whether it's a Baroque altarpiece or a graffiti-covered underpass, train yourself to ask, what else is here? That mosaic's tesserae might align with long-lost aqueducts. The abstract sculpture in the park could conceal wind load calculations for the surrounding skyscrapers. Even the wallpaper in an old mansion might hold the key to replicating forgotten acoustics. The beauty of these hidden layers isn't just in their practicality, it's in the way they transform passive viewing into an active quest. Art becomes a conversation across time where every generation gets to whisper back. So as we close this chapter, remember, the greatest masterpieces are never finished. They're waiting patiently, cunningly, for the right eyes to uncover their secrets. And who knows, the next revelation might come from you. Maybe you'll be the one to spot the blueprint hidden in a cathedral's rose window, or decode the urban plans woven into a subway mural. That's the magic of this story. It doesn't end here. It's still being written stroke by stroke in the art all around us. If you've enjoyed unraveling these mysteries with me, there's plenty more to discover. Hit subscribe to keep exploring history's most fascinating puzzles, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. What hidden blueprint would you want to uncover? Until next time, keep looking close.